This is the story of a black man. His name is Norman Fontanelli, and this is his Harlem apartment. What he wants, what he is, what you force him to be, is what you are. For he is you, staring back through a mirror of poverty and despair, of revolt and freedom. Look at him and know that to destroy him is to destroy yourself. You are weary of the long, hot summers. He is tired of the long, hungry winters. None of us are so far apart as it might seem. There is something about all of us that goes far deeper than blood or black and white. It is our common search for a better life and a better world. We march now over the same ground you once marched. We fight for the same things you still fight for. Our children's needs are the same as those of your children. We too are America. America is us. It gave us the only life we know, so we must share in its survival. Look at us. Listen to us. Try to understand us. Our appeal is urgent. There is yet a chance for all of us to live in peace beneath these restless skies. It was damp and cold in the Fontanelli apartment today. It was an especially bad hour for Norman Sr. He'd just been laid off his railway job where he worked part-time as a section hand. He lay beneath a thin, crumpled blanket trying to help 13-year-old Ryle with her homework. He said he had lain awake most of the night worrying because there was no food or money. None of the kids had winter coats. If it turned colder, they probably wouldn't be able to go to the school the following day. It's awful, he said. The black man always gets the walking papers first. He's the last to get called back. I've got 10 mouths to feed here, and there ain't enough in that icebox to even fill the baby's stomach. Ain't much I can do about it. The white man does all the hiring, and the white man does all the firing. When the hard work's done, we get sent home to wait until he feels like calling us back again. What can I do? I don't have an education, so I can't get anything better than what I got. That's why I hang on to this part-time job with the railway. At least they give me 5 days' notice. Little Richard, who was 3, kept pointing silently at the goldfish bowl on the mantel. Most of the goldfish had died from the cold the night before. Only one wiggled around slowly in the dirty green water. Richard could hardly talk. Fish is dead, he kept mumbling. His neck glands and mouth were swollen because he'd been eating plaster from the wall cracks again, and there was still poison in his system from the lead paint. Both he and 5-year-old Ellen had been in the hospital for this. I just don't know why those poor children eat the walls, their mother said. Doctors say something about a nervous condition they have. Both of them nearly died from it once. Bessie Fontanelli appears to be a strong woman, especially in the early part of the day when she looks younger than 39. But as the day wears on, she seems to age with it. By nightfall, she is crumpled into herself. All this crying and needing and wanting is about to drive me crazy, she said this evening. Now I've got double trouble. My husband is a good man, but every time they fire him, or lay him off, he takes it out on me and the kids. He gets his little bottle and he starts nipping. By the time he nips to the bottom, he's mad with the whole world. Then the kids and I get it, especially Norman Jr. November 16th. Bessie Fontanelli has attempted to give warmth to this home, but it remains a prison of endless filth. cluttered with rags and broken furniture. Her woman-touched shows in the shapeless soiled curtains, the dime store paintings on the grimy walls, the shredded scatter rugs covering the cracked linoleum, the wax flowers and the outdated magazines. She slaps the urine-soaked mattresses on the children's bed and shakes her head in disgust. I just can't break them of the habit, she says. Not a night passes that one of them don't wet the bed. Even if there were sheets, I couldn't find the time to keep them washed. Now and then one sees a little starched dress hanging clean above the rubble, like a flower above a weed patch. It's amazing the way the kids keep their books stacked so neatly all in the rubble. In the quieter moments, the older ones help the younger ones with their lessons. And at such times, the house seems to be filled with love. Norman Sr. is quiet, short, and powerfully built. Despair is in his eyes, his words, and his movement. But he hasn't given up yet. This whole building is crawling with roaches and rats. It ain't fit for dogs. But what can I do? My wife's always trying to get into the projects, but they won't let us in until I get a steady job. So we're always finding ourselves right where we started from. Nowhere. November the 19th. Today, as if she was recognizing the Sabbath, Bessie Fontanelli reached over and straightened a portrait of Christ that hangs above the baby's crib. I asked her if they were a religious family. Well, I guess we are, she said. At least we used to be. We just don't go to church anymore. It's hard keeping faith in something when everything's going so bad for you. I teach the kids their prayers, and that's the best I can do. Seems to me the most important thing now is to try and get them some kind of education. That's why I keep their heads in those books. November the 23rd, Thanksgiving Day. Bessie Fontanelli and the children were all sitting in the kitchen warming in front of the oven this morning when I arrived. There was no heat. There hadn't been any the night before. The 10 of them had slept huddled together in mattresses, with the oven going all night. There was warmed over fish for breakfast. Sausage and eggs were being served for the Thanksgiving dinner. November the 25th, 1967. I caught up with Mrs. Fontanelli today in the Board 4 Anti-Poverty Office of How You Act. She had gone there with 4 of her children for help. Bob Hagan, the board director, sat in his overcoat listening to her complaints. The poverty office had also been without heat for 3 days. Her complaints were common to Hagan's ears: broken windows, hunger, rats, roaches, garbage-strewn hallways, doors off the hinges, the heatless days when the wind whistled through the holes in the walls. The landlord looks and promises, but nothing happens. But just let us miss that $70 rent 1 month, and he's threatening to put us on the street, she said. Hagan promised help and asked her to come back to see him the following week. November the 27th. Bessie Fontanelli received a letter from her oldest son today. His name's Harry, she said with a trace of sadness in her voice. She sat in her coat with her back to the window light. He's got 7 more months to go in the Pilgrim State Hospital for narcotics. He got on that stuff when he was 15. I did everything I could, even took him to the police. But once he was hung up, there was nothing to do for him. To protect the other kids, I finally had to put him out when he was about 18 years old. He went from bad to worse. I haven't seen him since he's been out there. Tears running down her face. It cost $4.50 a piece for us to go out there and back, and that's too much for my husband and me to scrape up right now. I'd like to see him, though. He's a good boy at heart. Norman is a strange mixture. In his talk, there's a defiance for whites. The white policeman, the white butcher, the white clerk in the grocery or appliance store. His eyes have the hard glint of the older black men in Harlem. At 13, he is already primed for some kind of action. He is aggressive, determined, and powerfully built for his age. But his hostility is balanced by an overwhelming tenderness at times. Today, for instance, he lifted his baby brother Richard and smothered him with rough kisses. December the 7th. I have yet to see all the Fontanellis sitting down and eating together. One of the kids will cry his hunger, and Bessie Fontanelli will scrounge up a sandwich of some kind. Norman seems to exist on tiny 7-cent sweet potato pies from the grocery store. Richard, the 3-year-old, was eating a raw potato one day. Sometimes 4 of the younger children hungrily share one apple. But even if there was enough food for regular meals, the kitchen table is too small to accommodate all 10 of them. December the 8th. It was extremely cold today. Norman Sr. spent most of the evening stuffing more rags into the broken windows and cracks. His wife lay on the bed, tired and fevered with a bad cold. She had been up all night with Richard, whose neck glands and lips were swelling again. Poor child. It's so bad he can't hardly eat anything. There's no money to call a doctor, she said. I'll carry him over to the hospital tomorrow morning if he's no better. December the 10th. There was a quiet excitement in Miss Fontanelli as she waited for the guards to bring her son in. When he arrived, they embraced warmly as the guard watched. Norman Sr., Bessie, and Harry sat down at the table and began talking. It was awkward for all of them at first. But since time was short, the mother got down to the basic problem. I hope you come out good and clean, Harry. You've had enough trouble already. Oh, I'll be straight, Mama. It's just going to take a little time to get everything out of my system. Everything will be straight, Mama. I hope to God you never touch that stuff again. His answer stunned all 3 of us. Well, I don't know. I can't say for sure I'll never go back on it. You see, I wasn't on heroin, just cocaine, which wasn't so bad. Bessie Fontanelli's eyes watered, and Harry suddenly realized that his words had hurt her. He choked out a sob and covered his face. We left shortly after. December the 15th. I found Norman Jr. on the corner, warming over a garbage can fire this evening. The smell of snow was in the air, and the boy wore tennis shoes and a light windbreaker. This was his heaviest coat for winter. I asked him what he was doing out so late in the cold. Papa put me out, he said, rubbing his hands over the flame. For what? Nothing. He's mad about not having work, I guess. I didn't do anything. I asked him if he wanted to go home with me. No, he answered. Mama will fix things up. I'll get in all right. I was going up to see how things were. Bessie Fontanelli's voice came to the door before I had a chance to knock. You ain't going to put that boy out in the cold for the night. Not my son. I knocked and Ryle let me in. The argument stopped, but tension remained in the chilly apartment. I sat around for nearly half an hour in the uncomfortable stillness. The mother went with me to the door. Things are a little rough here tonight, she said softly. One of his friends gave him a bottle. He got churned up inside and put Norman out. But I'll get him in. December the 16th. Bessie Fontanelli was lying, groaning in misery when I arrived this afternoon. Little Richard had climbed beneath her arm. I asked her if she was ill again. She took a long time answering. When she did, it was through a painful half-smile. Well, he gave me a going-over last night. My ribs feel like they were broken. My neck is scratched, swollen. Now she began to cry. I just can't take it no more. It's too much for anybody to bear. I asked her where her husband was. In the hospital, she answered, over at Sydenham. How did he get there? I asked. I put him there. I just couldn't take any more. My mother's 65, and my father has beat her all her life. Kicking and beating. That's all I've known since I was a child. I know things are hard for my husband, losing his job and everything. But he hadn't ought to take it out on me. I asked her if she wanted to tell me why her husband was in the hospital. Well, when he got through kicking me, I got up and I poured some sugar and some honey into a boiling pan of hot water, and I let him have it right in the face. Why the sugar and the honey? That's to make it stick and burn a while. Lie is too messy. She was silent for a few moments. Tears were streaming down her face. I'm awfully sorry now that I did it. They say one of his eyes are hurt pretty bad. Both of them were closed when I went over there to see him this afternoon. But I just couldn't take any more. It's hard enough just trying to keep 10 kids alive. He should leave and let us alone. Then maybe we'd get more help from the city. I went over to the hospital to see him. Little Norman wanted to go, so I took him along. Mr. Fontanelli is in the first bed to the right of the corridor, the nurse told me. I looked at the man in the bed she had directed me to, but that's not your father, I said to Norman. Oh, yes, it is. I can tell by his hands. Look, see how fat they are? It was him, all right. But he was burned beyond recognition. The honey and sugar had served the purpose. How you feel, Papa? Norman Sr. stirred and looked at us through one puffed eye. The honey and sugar still coated his neck and his face. His right hand, which had been raised in an attempt to shield his face, was horribly burned. He sat up on the side of the bed and daubed his eyes with a gauze. I don't know why your mother did it, boy. I just don't know why. Then he laid back down and lapsed into a painful sleep. Just another one of those thousands of violences that explode in a ghetto every week, I thought as we left the hospital. In the heat of summer, they pile up and spill over into the street. And buildings burn. And people are killed. And windows are smashed. And the big Normans and the little Normans dash in to loot for what they don't have at home. As we crossed the street and climbed the 4 flights to the cold apartment, I could only wonder why they waited for summer.